All right, let's talk a little bit about the world that Abraham would have lived in, the world that he left to travel to a land that God would show him, and we'll trace the Fertile Crescent from Ur of the Chaldees. Abraham is actually following it up through Nineveh and then down into Canaan, and God leading him into a world that would one day be his. So let's talk a little bit about Mesopotamia. It means the land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. It's a wonderful, fertile place to set up agriculture. There is water, and so farming and the rest is a great help here, as well as being sort of the crossroads for trade. So if you control that area, then your economy includes both the agriculture and trade with other caravans coming in and out. Sumer, the nations that make up around the Tigris and Euphrates, the first Mesopotamian culture. Uh, Other cultures would come later and they would adopt what Sumer had already developed. So the Akkadians, the Babylonians, will be talking about Hittites and Assyrians and Chaldeans. They eventually take over the land that was once Sumer, and then the contributions that Sumer culture provided will be adopted by those later cultures. We talked about their economy. It is a city-state type system, so you have Ur and Uruk and Lachish. We saw those on the map. We have religious beliefs. Their gods are fertility gods. So much in agriculture depended on whether you got rain, and so the fertility gods related to agriculture, but they also related, as we'll see in the story of Jacob and Rachel stealing her father's household gods, related to fertility. Rachel is in a contest with her sister Leah in producing offspring for Jacob, and she wants all the help she can get, so she steals her father's household gods. Sumer also had a number of cultural achievements, whether you're talking about the ziggurats or the idea of zero or a precise 12-month calendar, and the world's first writing system, as far as we know, cuneiform. Here's a ziggurat that was built. There's the architectural rendering of all that you can't see in the picture, and some of their carvings that show early life in Sumer. Here are their gods. There is Anu, who is similar to Zeus, Enlil, the god of the air, Utu, the sun god. And so if we look closer into Sumer, you can see here are the big cities that have developed, and they are cooperating together. There's Ur and Uruk. Farther up, you can find Babylon. You can go over to the arrow, which is going to head us toward Mari and to Nineveh, and then down into Canaan. So Abraham is actually going to follow that line. We talked about the Sumerian king list before when we were looking at chronology, and one of the things that we have that's interesting is their king list is divided between kings before the flood and kings after the flood. It's an interesting secular testimony to the idea of a flood, and the kings before the flood are listed, and their times for living are huge. But we could talk about that in a little bit. But it's interesting, after we look at the number of kings that lived, it says, then the flood swept over, and then we have the kings coming after that. There's a book called History Begins in Sumer. It's written by Samuel Noah Kramer, and in it he describes 39 firsts. As far as history is concerned, Sumer was the first to develop 39 different aspects of culture. And I've just listed some of them here. They had the first schools, the first history that was written, the first law code, putting together what could and couldn't be done, the first farmer's almanac, and then they had a pretty developed literary system, whether we're talking about elegies or like funeral responses, whether we're talking poetry or debate, whether we're talking an apology for suffering, with their own version of Job, and or whether we're talking about debates. They were already developing a pretty strong literary um, collection. So Kramer outlines for us 39 firsts, and you'll want to be sure to check out that book when you get a chance. Scripture then tells us this is the world that Abraham is leaving. Now, Scripture says that it's Terah that leaves first, and he brings his family, and they travel up to sort of the top of the Fertile Crescent, where Haran is, and they settle there with Terah until Terah dies. Terah has three sons, Abraham, Haran, and Nahor. Lot is the son of Haran, who dies, and Lot chooses to go with his uncle as they travel down into Canaan, into the Promised Land. So Abram is right out of this culture that we have been describing. These are his training, his background when he sends his son back to, or his son, when his grandson goes back. He is going back to this world in order to meet a wife and then return. So this is Abraham's world. Here's his travels. Here you can see the whole of the Fertile Crescent. You can see Ur and Babylon, and then up to Nineveh and over to Haran, which is as far as Abraham's family had gotten before his father Terah died. And then from Haran, God calls Abram, and he travels along the road all the way down into Canaan, and then his journey, when there is a famine, it travels on down even into Egypt. And so you see this tracing of the Fertile Crescent. Nobody went straight across because that is the eastern desert. This Canaan will be very important for political control, because whoever owns this land has, as you see on this map, the King's Highway. How do you get trade between Babylon or Ur and Egypt? Well, there's the road. You can't go across the desert. You've got to go up and around. And so if you control that, it's a great spot for profit, which means, of course, that we are always fighting over it. So there you are. This is Abraham's world. By the way, there are several archaeological sites that are here. Ugarit is important. Byblos is important. Let's see if there are anything else. Ebla finds, archaeological finds come there that give us a real understanding of the time, that even back to Abraham, what life was like. So this is the ancient Near East, as we can describe it. We will pay attention in Abraham's life to his contact with Hittites, and you can see that the Hittites, by and large, are up in the area which is now Turkey. So if that's true, then Abraham is not the only pilgrim. He's not the only settler. There are lots of people who are moving, and Canaan is already occupied by Canaanites as well as Hittites and others, as we'll see this area of land develop. All right, thanks for hanging out. We will talk soon. Thanks.